And I said, wow, based on everything these people are saying and preparing for, they're going to go to D.C. and do something like this. And then they did.
Yeah, but I think if you say that the sky is falling enough times, just like Alex Jones, eventually a couple of those things are correct.
In 2018, when I said escalation of political violence is going to reach a massive tipping point, and then in 2020, they firebombed St. John's Church and the White House grounds, and they took over numerous cities, I predicted that. So to say, you've been saying for a long time it's around the corner, and every time you say something's going to happen, it does, but you're still wrong. Dude, I don't care if I'm wrong.
Well, it's not every time you say it that it doesn't happen. What I'm saying is that you've made the prediction so many times. I've heard it so many times on your show. Are we this close? We're this close to civil war. It's right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. And the real question is, what will happen when the civil war gets here? I haven't seen the Civil War, Tim. I'm going to be honest with you, and it doesn't look to me like the political will is there to do it. Now, the January 6th people went quietly into the night, and nobody's really saying much about that either.
So the first thing I'll say academically is I don't know if you've ever actually read history books. Perhaps a guy like me read? Yes, I've read history books. And well, so when you read articles specifically about various historical periods, you realize that we condense it in our history books. And so when we talk about the rise of Hitler, people tend to forget that it's like 20 years through Weimar Germany leading up to this point where this guy rises to power. And so
the conditions were set for the Weimar Republic. We had massive inflation.
I think you're either being purposefully obtuse or you cannot comprehend basic facts. Well, and the intentional being intentionally obtuse is to say, I recognize that many different academics have predicted civil war, state that we're in civil strife. You said political violence is going to escalate. The Summer of Love did happen. You said in 2020 that a bunch of angry Trump supporters are going to go to D.C. and storm, the White House. It wasn't the White House, it was the Capitol building. You got that one right. And you've been warning about how these things lead to each other. And now today, as of today, because the Civil War didn't kick off at any of those time periods, you've been wrong to predict these things are escalating. The first thing is, when I say, hey, look, here's a guy who said this thing is happening, that's not me predicting it. That's saying a Princeton professor has made this prediction. A former CIA official has made this prediction. Numerous security advisors have made this prediction. Canada is saying it's improbable. So it's not necessarily a prediction, but they're concerned about its potentiality. Investors are now making this prediction. We are in civil strife. I'm not making that up, nor am I predicting it. I'm saying that's an assessment of leaders in politics, infrastructure, and culture.
Of some leaders, of some people, not of every. There's no united academia saying this is right around the corner, guys. That's not happening. You pull the sources that you want because they help craft your narrative, Tim.
And then when the Summer of Love happens, I was wrong.
Okay, so again, if you say the sky is falling every single day, eventually you get some keys of it right. But I've been hearing this from you for a long, long, long time. What have you heard from here? Again, I'll repeat it. I have listened to you long before I was ever inside of any type of political commentary. I was listening to you talk about coming civil wars, how this is happening.
What was wrong?
In the next few months, next few months, this could really set the stage between the states and this for a new civil war.
What was wrong? What was wrong?
They just didn't happen.
What didn't happen?
None of these civil wars that you.
What civil wars did I predict that didn't happen? What civil wars?
Well, I didn't come in with a list of all the times Tim Pool's predicted civil war, but dude,
okay, you're at the point
famous for it.
You're at the point where you've lost the argument and you're making things up.
What part of the argument did I lose?
You said that I predicted a civil war would happen at a period.
No, I'm saying that you talk about it constantly. Right. And I have not.
What was I wrong about?
I haven't seen any of the evidence of this.
Summer of Love is not evidence.
No, it's not. There's no civil war, even from the Summer of Love. That's not a civil war.
When did I predict that the Summer of Love would lead to a June 21st civil war in the United States?
I mean, that's what we're talking about right now, though, is the leading. So when is this? So let's be hyper-specific then. What area, what decade, next 5 years, next 4 years, next 3 years, do you think we'll see a civil war? Or is it something you're talking about that's 30 or 40 or 50 years down the road? Or do you just not know?
Literally, I've said, I don't know.
You don't know.
And so you made up that I predicted a civil war at a specific period.
No, I'm saying that that's all I've heard you talk about for years.
What was I wrong about?
Again, Tim, I didn't come in prepared to debate with you. I came in prepared to debate with Richard Spencer. But I'm happy to actually come in again, and I will bring a list of everything Tim Pool has been wrong about if you want me to from
I'm wrong about a lot.
Yeah, okay, well, then that makes my point.
But the idea that I would recognize me saying these things might happen and being wrong about it does not mean that I'm in general wrong about the bulk of what I'm saying right now. The issue is numerous academics articles have recognized the basis of what civil strife is. I don't care if we're looking for a national committee of recognizing civil strife. Civil strife is a period described as political violence, death caused by political violence and increasing political instability. We can then assess everything that's going on, determine whether or not we think that's true, and everyone's allowed to have their opinion. But in 2018, when I said, hey, this political violence is going to get worse, and then it did. And then I said, man, I think if Trump loses, you're going to get a ton of these people on the right going to D.C. They're going to lose their minds. They're going to be like storming the White House or whatever. And then it happened. And so those are just two big examples where I'm like, X equals Y. I hope that doesn't happen. Where we're at now is all of these things are behind us. These have all happened. And I say, if you look at history and what these things tend toward, and when you look at what has been said 6 years ago and what it has tended toward and what has already happened, things don't bode well for us in November. And you go, no, we're fine. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
That's not what I said. So I've been kind enough not to strawman you. Don't strawman me. I didn't say.
You said Biden's
going to get elected. No, it'll be fine.
Biden's going to get elected. Yeah. No one's going to do anything.
That's more akin to what I'm saying. That I think that it is likely that Biden gets re-election, okay, and that you don't see a civil war from it. Yeah, you might see some activism, might see some small-scale violence that happens. No, I don't think it's going to lead.
You've been strawmanning the whole time.
I don't think it's going to lead to anything widespread. To be honest, I don't.
You're still strawmanning. Because my point.
How can I strawman my position?
You're strawmanning my position.
I wasn't talking about your position.
I did not say Joe Biden getting elected starts a civil war.
Tim, I was talking about Andrew Wilson's position is not Tim Pool's. I can't strawman myself. It's my position.
You said, I don't think Joe Biden getting elected will start a civil war. That's great.
That's my position. When did I say it was yours?
But why would you make a point that I don't disagree on? That has nothing to do with my position.
Because I just wanted to give you my position so that you understood my position.
Okay, so I don't know what your argument is.
My argument is that I don't believe that there's going to be widespread political violence. Even though I think Trump is going to lose, I don't think there's going to be widespread political violence. That's my point.
That's fair. That's fair enough. I feel like I want to intervene here a little bit. I haven't contributed much over the past hour.
And we got to wrap up.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll be very brief. An important difference is that with the American Civil War in the 1860s, you had two different elites that were willing to fight one another. So you had a plantation elite, and then you had a federal Northeast elite. They became in conflict. Remember, Robert E. Lee, all these people, maybe Stonewall Jackson is an exception. These were kind of like the billionaires of the day. These were massive plantation-owning people who had something to fight for. I would say that currently the elites they want the system to continue. They have a lot invested in the system. You don't have that situation. Now, I think a better parallel than the 1860s would actually be the collapse of the Soviet Union, where we're headed for a legitimacy crisis. We have polarization, which I don't think was as present in the Soviet Union at that time. But there's a legitimacy crisis. It doesn't matter who wins. Biden could win. The Trump people are going to go crazy. Trump could win. The Biden people are going to go crazy. There's just this impasse where both sides are going to say no to whatever happens. Now, Tim might not be right, and it's hard to speculate about how it unfolds. I think it's unreasonable to demand that someone speculate about how it unfolds. But I think he's fundamentally correct in the sense that the likelihood of delegitimization and general social strife and breakdown is remarkably high. And to that extent, I agree with him. I think you're getting at something, even if you're you might be wrong on the details.
Well, so the way we've literally described it is the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of the oligarchs. When confidence in the central system breaks, you get and this was like a couple weeks ago, we were talking about this. Arizona has a meat processing plant that's owned by, I don't want to use any specific examples. Let's say meat plant, that's the name of the company. They've got 17 plants all across the country. Social disorder. Biden wins, confusion unfolds, and then you get, like with Texas's assertion over the river against the federal government. Let's say something like that happens pertaining to trade in some way. I don't know how it escalates. When the Soviet Union collapsed in Ukraine, guy shows up to a factory with a gun and two of his buddies, and he says, "Who's in charge?" They say, "This guy." They say, "Bring him over here." He says, Who delivers your goods? And he goes, we usually get our goods delivered from this time to this time. Okay, who do you report to? I don't know anymore because it's all broken down. They're not answering the phone. Okay, you report to me now. I'm going to make sure that all the goods your factory needs get in. I'm going to make sure that all your men get paid and you guys eat. Sound good? And they go, sounds good. And he goes, okay, I'm the boss now. You make sure everybody knows. That's how the oligarchs got their power. When things like that escalate in the United States is what I am discussing. What I'm saying right now, with a unknown in the election, a federal level lawsuit, which we've already seen now escalating to its, you know what, I'll put it this way, as I always do every time I talk about it. For all I know, Joe Biden walks up to Trump, shakes his hand, they smile and they hug, they cry, and they say, we cannot let this country fall apart. It's time to team up and restore the American values, and everyone cheers, and then we're all happy with it.
Yeah, just low likelihood.
Right. Or you have Oklahoma banning abortion in every instance, and you have Colorado legalizing up to the point of birth and potentially beyond. This moral impasse cannot sustain itself next to each other. With more and more issues like that happening, we run into a Soviet Union-style collapse. Now, the problem then arises in that with the Soviet Union, you know, Ukraine, of course, is massive farmland, which is needed. Russia was very upset. Putin obviously was very upset. He wants to restore this. But the issue is the geographics of the United States are very different, especially how the states are divided. They're not built upon natural barriers in the same way in the West as they were in a lot of Europe, mountains separating certain territories, certainly true in the United States. But for instance, what is Las Vegas? Las Vegas is a production of modernity. It cannot survive outside of national trade.
They have to import all their water.
Right.
People can't live there.
Yeah.
Well, what do those people do? That's an interesting question to what happens when you're going to get social breakdown. Arizona has already tried to take Great Lakes water. The only reason they can't is that the Great Lakes region has a treaty with Canada, with Ontario, because Ontario borders the Great Lakes. Due to this international treaty, it supersedes the authority the federal government have to actually intervene on how other states can take water from the Great Lakes. Arizona doesn't have water. They need the Colorado River. California, Southern California does as well. If we see any kind of destabilization, even 20% of what the Soviet Union went through, you are going to have a major crisis in the Southwest when California says it's our water, but upstream they can't control it. They have no access to it. So what? Does California send a delegation to Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado to negotiate the rights after the federal government stops enforcing things? Or maybe Arizona says no. What happens if one state says, we've seen a major influx of people from Las Vegas because they have no food into our state. We need to fill up a basin so we can supply water to these people. California says that construction would disrupt SoCal. We got 13 million people. You can't do that. And they say, well, we got 10 million. What are we supposed to do? There treaties perhaps, but you know, we didn't see like great warring factions between the Soviets, but you did get Chechnya, you did get Georgia.
There was huge warring factions between the Soviets.
I just mean like it didn't break out into World War III. It didn't break out into like the nukes weren't firing at each other. You will get negotiations on trade, but my concern is if confidence breaks in the federal government because people can't figure out what happened for the second time around, and if the escalation is that Trump supporters refuse to accept a Biden presidency, like we've already seen with Texas rejecting federal authority on the border, California on drugs, I think Tennessee and West Virginia and Maryland on guns, and Virginia, then if that trend continues, which I don't see why it wouldn't, I'd love to understand why it wouldn't, you end up with a Soviet-style collapse. You'll end up with warring factions. And the issue I see in the United States that I don't think would be as similar as the Soviet Union is hyperpolarization, which didn't necessarily exist. And for sure, Portland is Portland, but Eastern Oregon is very, very much not happy and has actually voted to secede from the state already. 13 counties, I believe, have voted to secede from Oregon. I don't see how those people in the event of breaking of confidence in the federal government just say, we resign ourselves to our fate of being ruled by far-left degenerates who have taken by force the capital of our urban centers.
This kind of resides around the idea that the feds stop enforcement, or that the feds stop participating, or that the feds stop with the power dynamic of the people who are in charge of these states and don't have the power to cut off federal funding and don't have the power of the bribe and don't have any of these things. And I think we're a long way away from that. I just think we're a long way away.
So we will wrap up because we did go way, way over. But I guess my final point is, and again, I will give you the last word,
Sure.
is I've never argued it was soon.
Yeah.
Soon is a relative term, which could be we are in the Weimar Germany period, and by 2040, with the collapse of Social Security, this is when it really breaks down. But everything we've seen so far is not indicative of peaceful goings-on.
One of the things that we regularly say around here, or at least I do, and is kind of caught on with some people, is I just don't see the off-ramp, right? So maybe it's not in the next 5 years, or maybe it's not in the next 10 years, but I don't see the solution to the problems that we have, or at least I don't see people people gravitating to what seem to be the solutions. And honestly, I think the solutions are, again, stuff like we talk about focusing on family and trying to hold that as the centerpiece of society. And I don't see anybody doing it. And anytime anyone does, they straight up get attacked by the left. Feminists are all over you, get attacked as some kind of misogynist just for saying the family is good. Look what they did to the Kansas City kicker, just because he said that he espoused his religious beliefs, and the left was apoplectic. So it's not that it's going to happen here, now, then, or whatever. It's just, look, we see a lot of problems coming, and these
genetic dead ends.
So
they're all genetic dead ends.
Doesn't change the fact.
That's an off ramp.
One last thing.
I don't think so.
Because it's time to go eat.
Okay.
The first discussions of civil war in the United States was actually in the 1820s. The concern over slavery was bubbling up at that point, and numerous political compromises had been made that kept people kind of calm. And it reached a head in 1861. Bleeding Kansas, 7 years before that, for I think it's like 15 years before the Civil War, people were murdering each other over the issue of slavery. John Brown had walked up to a guy and blasted him in the face, just killed him outright for being a slave owner. That was before the Civil War had happened. And the last thing I'll say, the Battle of Fort Sumter, where only one guy died, it was only by accident, is historically recognized as the start of the American Civil War. And even though it had started, people of the United States did not believe Civil War was happening, and they went to picnic at the first Battle of Bull Run. And they watched people get their heads blown off, and it was bedlam.
Yep.
So, Andrew, if you want to give your point and take the final word, and then shout anything out as we wrap up.
Sure. So I will say that the United States also prepared for a contingency with a massive war to our neighbor to the north, Canada, which we were assured. I mean, they were positive that there was going to be a conflict with Canada, and that they were going to have to invade Canada, and that Canada was going to invade the United States, and they had massive military contingencies for this.
Still up in the air.
Politics, well, hopefully. Politics, not so easy to predict. I agree with that. Not so easy to predict. Do I see that there could be a solution, an off-ramping solution because of the birth rate crisis? I do. I think that that's a natural off-ramp. If secularists, loser degenerates can't reproduce and aren't reproducing, that bodes pretty well for the future. I'm not so sure that people with full stomachs are going to be doing massive, widespread political activism to the point where they're actually harming people in the street. I don't think we're to that point yet, and I don't think the feds are going to back off at all when it comes to federal enforcement of anything. I just don't. I don't see that happening. Not even in my lifetime do I see that happening. And then, further from there, shout out to The Crucible. That is my channel. It's the fastest growing debate channel on the internet, to my knowledge. I appreciate the spirited debate with you, Tim, and with you, Richard Spencer.
I think it was good. I think it was fun.
Yeah, and thanks you guys as well.
Where do I go to see the full catalog? I've heard you say before, but can't remember. You go to thecrucible.video. Thecrucible.video. Become a member over there. $15 a month. It's nothing.